Hi everyone, welcome to the ttff 20 industry events, and thanks so much for joining us. This year, our full film program will be screened online from September 9th to 15th with our new media exhibition installed at the Medulla Art Gallery in Woodbrook, Port of Spain. If you're joining us via Facebook Live, please feel free to post all of your questions in the comment section and we'll address them. Don't forget to check out our full film listing and pay for film bundles at online.ttfilmfestival.com. We'd like to thank all of our TTFF 20 sponsors and partners. TTFF 20 is given leading sponsorship by the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and the Arts, contributing sponsorship by Republic Bank Limited, with Shell Trinidad and Tobago Limited supporting our online industry events. So hi, Gaspar, welcome to the Trinidad and Tobago Film Festival. It was great seeing your film. Can you tell us a little bit about your film and where you're from?
Yeah, well, I was born in the U.S. My parents are Cuban. They actually met in New York City in the 60s. And so in some ways, so my film was ERROL FLYNN'S Ghost, Hollywood in Havana, which sort of tells about the secret life of American movies in Cuba, starting really, well, at the very beginning, but mostly we cover the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and really and through the present. So I became interested in that because my parents were Cuban, and they seemed to have this sort of very deep knowledge of old American films. I mean, to the point where I remember being a little boy and my dad would come in the room and I'd be watching, like, you know, an old movie, because I always loved old movies. And he would say, oh, this is the one where this, you know, so-and-so, you know, does this. And these were obscure films, you know, this is like before cable, right? This is before films played all the time. And they were really obscure films that you might only see one time. And I got really interested in that, in the fact that they were so conversant with these old American movies. And then obviously as I got older, I realized that the reason for that is because these films screened, you know, throughout Cuba, but particularly in Havana, for decades, you know, and they were as omnipresent there as they were in the US. And so that was sort of the kernel of the idea to make ERROL FLYNN'S Ghost.
Nice. Sorry I didn't see you, Wendy. Welcome to Trinidad and Tobago Film Festival. And Gaspar, looking at your film was very Hi, Wendy.
Hi.
So Gaspar, looking at your film was very nostalgic for me because I lived there in Cuba for 3 years. So I saw some things that I saw there in Cuba that were very true in Cuba. It was strange for me to go speak to regular people who live regular citizens, who aren't filmmakers, who aren't film buffs, who know so much about film, especially the older ones, because that's all they did in Cuba. They look at films, especially older films. So I wanted to ask you a little bit, how do you see things changing now? Do you think because the world is so much more connected now than before, especially amongst young Cubans, they have so much more connection to the United States. Do you think they look at cinema in the same aspect, with the same level of reference, or do you think it's different? Because I noticed in your film, a lot of the interviewees were a lot more older. So do you think it's different with the younger?
Yes. You know, it's interesting. Yes, our interviewees were purposely people who had grown up, you know, in the 50s, in the 60s, and could talk about a different film culture, one that was very kind of based around American films. American films, by the way, still show in Cuba. They just show through other means, you know, or distributions, right, are distributed through other companies that are not based in the US. So in fact, if you look closely at our film, quite a few of the marquees have American film titles. They're just in Spanish. But to your question, I mean, Cuba has a vibrant film culture and has had a vibrant. Our film really covers the 40s, the 50s, before the revolution, before the founding of ICAIC, before really the rise of an indigenous film culture in Cuba. but that was 60 years ago. So Cuba does have a vibrant film culture. I do think there's always this conversation between Cuban films, American films, European films. I mean, Cubans are kind of voracious in their appetites in terms of culture. And so I think, yeah, I do think the availability of technology, though that's limited in Cuba. You know, one of the things we discovered was that in 1950, Havana alone had something on the order of 138 theaters that showed movies. By the time we filmed in Havana in 2015, and you can probably attest to this, I would say there were probably fewer than 24 that still showed films. That is really because of the technology. Now, you know, there is no streaming technology per se in Cuba. So you have DVD houses where they'll play DVDs. There are still a handful of theaters where you can, they have actual, they have on celluloid, right? So they can project films on celluloid. But in terms of keeping up with the technology, they haven't been able to do that for, you know, a variety of reasons. So you don't see, I think, you don't see the amount of traffic that I think you would if they had the technology.
Yeah, and also, I think it's much more, not only about the technology, but I think also that there's a whole culture around cinema going, even though it is much more readily available to see films in your homes. Every time I went to the La Rampa, it was like an experience because people go there for the vibe, for the ambience, for the experience of going to the cinema. And their culture is so rich. With cinema going is not just about the cinema, it's going to the restaurants, the cafes, the cinema theme and all of that. It's a whole trip. So I thought that your film captured that really well. And also it was good to see the interviewees were mixed. It was nice to see Cubans speaking about it from their point of view, and also people from United States speaking about it from their point of view as well. So I think you can get both of them. I enjoyed listening to Eliseo speak every time that man speaks. I love it. So how was your process like of getting those interviewees in particular to speak about your topic?
You know, it was just, it was kind of a network. I mean, we let them know what we were interested in doing, that we wanted to tell that story. We wanted to show those beautiful old theaters and talk about that connection between the US and Cuba. That film, you know, really was an early connection. And they liked that, I think. And so, you know, one phone call would lead to another, and getting access to the theaters themselves, you know, that all had to go through ECAIC, which is the state film agency, and they were wonderful to work with. I think they got it. They liked, you know, they liked the project. The project was really embraced, I think, on a couple of different levels. I mean, we shot this film back in 2015, I'm sorry, 2015. So that was the last year of the Obama presidency. And so relations were better. You know, we had just kind of opened up, and people, I think, were excited about that. And so that made it easier. Also, I think the fact that they're really trying to preserve or renovate a lot of these beautiful old movie theaters. And they were looking for support in that at the time. I think it's probably still the case now. And so they liked the idea that we were there and we were sort of showing them off. You know, and they're in various states. I mean, some of them are beautifully preserved. Others need some work. But as somebody makes the point in the film, you know, they're still there. In the US, there are very few theaters that are that old, that are still standing because they get torn down to make way for, you know, malls and other things.
Thanks, Gaspar. Speaking about love for films, Wendy, I love your film so much. Have you been to Cuba as well, Wendy?
Yeah, I've been there. I actually premiered the film in La Habana in December in last year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one thing I love about your film that was that it felt very, very authentic. It felt real. There was no pretentiousness about that film at all. And I love the way in which you filmed the people. It reminded me a lot. I spoke about Cuba because it reminded me a lot of some of the people I met in Cuba when I stayed in the Sierra Maestra, which is a mountain range in Cuba. And it's interesting because two cultures are so different in Dominican Republic and in Cuba, yet you captured something real, something pure about the essence of their humanity and the way they interact with the environment. I thought that was very powerful. Like when how you showed, especially you had moments where you paused in the film, you paused the images so that I can just listen to the sounds, and there were certain elements of the images as that continued moving, but it reminded me to just be present in a moment and to just absorb everything that is right now. And then it was so powerful when the contrast came at the second half of the film, when technology started moving and when all the songs that I loved hearing in the first half weren't there anymore. It was replaced, it was dominated by sounds of the vehicles and the electronics and the radio and television and all of that stuff. So I wanted to know if you had planned going to there, how did you have a connection to this place in particular, those people in particular, and if you knew that they were going to be, that village was going to have electricity in that moment.
Thank you so much. Those things that you mentioned make my heart warm. That you got all these feelings from the movie and all these all these ideas that flowed. Um, I I know this part of the Dominican Republic is very similar to the oriental part of Cuba. It's actually we have the same accent and people is pretty much the same. So when I was in Cuba, all the time people was they thought I was Cuban from the oriental side of the island. And I remember every time I see the films in Sierra Maestra and many other colleagues that have been there, they always tell me the same thing, that this reminds them so much of the process also that is going on in Cuba. Um, and I got that also from the persons, the public that went to see the film in the Festival de La Habana in December. They also mentioned that it's very similar, the situation that is going on there. So that made me think that this documentary, this document is actually not only an audiovisual heritage for Dominican Republic, but for the whole rural Caribbean, including the rest of the islands, because I think is the same thing that is going on. The changes that the rural landscape and the visual rural landscape, but also the sound landscape in the rural Caribbean is going through this evolution. I have a connection with this town because I since I was a teenager, I go to hike the Pico Duarte, which is the highest mountain in the Caribbean, and that's one of the places where you start hiking. You have different points to start hiking the mountain, and that's one of the towns where you start. And when I started going there, and I stayed there with the families and got to know everybody from the town, it was very very primitive. They didn't have no technology at all. We didn't have cell phones, no internet. Well, that was before all the digital connection was so easy. But even after, in the city, there was internet and there was smartphones, and we were more connected. And well, in Dominican Republic, we still have a lot of electricity cuts. So even if that's a little better in the cities, in the rural areas is even harder. So they didn't even have electricity, as you can see in the film. And I started thinking about a different film from this one. I was working with people that didn't know the ocean. So I started shooting there, well, trying to find this other documentary that was called No Sea Island. And I was thinking about well, exploring and reflecting about the island identity with people that actually haven't ever seen the ocean or the sea. So they were living in the middle of an island, but they didn't know the sea. And I was working with this documentary. That didn't happen, or that hasn't happened yet. I have it parked for the moment, but I realized that I needed to tell this other story, that was what was going on while I was there. So I filmed for around 4 years or something like that. And I just noticed that this was even bigger than the other story that I was trying to find. And I thought it was an important thing to put into a film, because, as I was saying, I think it's a visual document for the country and for the region, and also for these people that have this special connection to nature, and how technology and progress is moving in. They find themselves in like this crossroads of having to change their relationship with nature, but also needing this technology to have an easier life. So that's how the film got alive, or was born. And well, it was a long journey, but now we have the documentary, and I'm happy that it's traveling to the other islands. For me, it's really important that it's being seen in Trinidad and Tobago, and before in Cuba, and I hope it goes to the rest of the region, and that it's appreciated as you were appreciating it.
And those people that you worked with in your film, did they know about the story that you were trying to tell? And did they see the film afterward, and what was their reaction like?
Yes, they have seen it. Well, it's very funny to see their reaction. They see themselves, and of course it wasn't the movie they were expecting. It's a different movie from the one they were expecting, but they remember the process of the shooting, and how I was there so much time with them, and observing, and with the team also. Maybe they wanted to see a little more action on the film, but they were happy with it, and I think they do identify themselves. They see themselves in the film, and they see the conflict that they're going through with this situation. Now, just a year after the film was finished, they actually finished the highway. Well, not a highway, but like the street, and it's so different. I couldn't put this in the film because it was already done, but the town is like, oh my God, it's like this was what was going to be. And they talk about this, and they see the film with some nostalgia, and they wanna have it there to show it to the children and their grandchildren, that to see how different it is already, just maybe a couple of years before, and it's already so different, because they are like having a street with pavement. It's a complete different story for them because of the agriculture and the access to people, and of course the electricity. But even more radical of a change, it has been the highway. Yeah, having the streets.
It's a good thing you captured the film when you did then.
Sorry, can you say that again?
It's a good thing that you captured the film when you did.
Yes, of course. It was good timing. Good timing.
So Gaspar, I just wanted to speak a little bit to you, also about capturing moments in time. Gaspar, you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So in your film, a big part of your film was Errol Flynn's presence, and it was interesting hearing about people's perception of him. And there was one part in particular that stood out to me. I can't remember who it was, but one of the interviewees said that people don't remember Errol Flynn by how he died, how his degradation, the latter parts of his life and career as a filmmaker. They remember him by his golden moments when he was Robin Hood, when he was this big action star. And one of the interviewees said that he's not sure people should remember him by who he was in this latter part of his career or his life, but by who he used to be. So I just wanted to get your take on that, because those were obviously the interviewee's words, but I want to hear what your take on him was, on people's perception of him.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. We gravitated toward Flynn, not necessarily because we wanted to tell the story of his life, but because we saw him as a symbol of that classical Hollywood era. Because he was on the one hand, he was a very unique talent. You know, he made films that really no one else was making. You know, he was, you know, the swashbuckling films, and it's very hard to, you know, Robin Hood. It's very hard to imagine anybody else's Robin Hood, other than maybe like, you know, in the silent era. But so we were really drawn to him as a symbol. And then obviously we were interested in the fact that at this sort of key moment in the national life of Cuba in the late 50s, he sort of jumps off the screen and takes you know, a role in this real life drama that's unfolding with Fidel Castro and the revolution. So that was our attraction to him as a figure. We thought that he could take us through our story in a way. And the biography, that just kind of came into the film, I think, rather naturally. The people we interviewed, in one case, we had a biographer, and we had people who were film historians who obviously could speak of Flynn that way. I think he comes off, I mean, I think he ends up in Cuba in the 50s, and he's kind of a sad figure. I think that's what people were speaking to. And in some ways, his career tracks the decline of the studios in Hollywood, because by the 1950s, the system is in decline. Flynn is not in demand anymore. He's actually roaming the world, as somebody puts it in the film, trying to get away from his creditors, trying to get away from his ex-wives, all the people he owed money to. And he's just trying to make something happen. He's trying to make films in Europe. He's trying to make films in Cuba. Nothing really comes together. And then the revolution happens. And I think he's drawn to the revolution for reasons that are sincere. I think he, you know, in the 30s, he'd gone to Spain because he was interested in the Civil War in Spain in the 30s. And so I think he was drawn to these sorts of settings. But it's also true that it got him back into the headlines. You know, the idea that Errol Flynn was running around Havana, you know, and was meeting with Fidel Castro and was a presence down there, when that was the biggest news story in the world. And so to us, it was an interesting chapter. But yeah, I think in some ways he's a sad kind of figure by this time. But I guess I would agree that you know, we don't think of Errol Flynn as this character who was running around, you know, in Havana in the late 1950s, trying to cobble together a living. We remember him as Captain Blood and the Seahawk and Robin Hood, and, you know, these wonderful characters that I think, you know, he was very unique in his ability to embody those characters. So to the degree that the film draws attention to, I think, his very unique contribution to American film, I'm very happy about that. But for us, he was really kind of a vehicle that allowed us to look at this kind of love affair between Cubans and Hollywood films.
Sorry. And also not only with films, but I think in your film you represented well how we as humans love to hold on to things past. Like I show you, I saw that how you represented the Cubans, how they do their posters and how they are in love with analog film. We hold on to that which we treasure a lot, that which has value to us. And I think that's it's a nice contrast seeing your film and seeing Wendy's film as well, how those people there are so much inclined to change. You want to say something?
Yeah, actually, and Wendy's film I thought was terrific. I really enjoyed it. But that was the connection I found as well. That there's this kind of there's the old world, and then there's there's the world that we're sort of stepping into. But those things kind of exist in a conversation, you know, the present and the past. And that was my takeaway from her film as well.
And your films couldn't be more different as well. Your film and Wendy's film was so different, yet they are so connected. It showed how all that is humanity is connected in some way or another. And thank you so much for sharing your films. Is there anything else you would like to say before we go?
No, I want to thank you for inviting us. It's been great to be part of the festival, and I look forward to doing it again, hopefully.
Wendy?
Also say thank you, and that I hope I can be there in the future. I was so looking forward to be in the festival. I'm so sorry. Well, of course, because of the pandemic in general, but it's so sad also to miss the festivals. But especially Trinidad and Tobago's festival, I had a special desire to go. I hope I can make it in the future. And thank you so much for taking us into account.
No problem. Okay. We still going on? I think we have some more time. So, Wendy, you would like to speak a little bit about what else you're working on?
Sure. I'm currently starting to research for a film also in the island. It's a film that I'm pretending to make a reflection about how the story and the history of Dominican and Haitian relationships has been told in the different point of views from both sides of the frontier of the island that divides the island. There is, as I guess you both know, there is a very hard and deep wound in our island that divides these two countries. And I want to make a film also working with the landscape and visiting and exploring the landscapes that have been crucial in the storytelling of the history of both countries since the era of the colonies, and when they started being different colonies, because it used to be, of course, one island before the colonization, and only well, it was divided in different regions, but it wasn't different countries, of course. And then it was only one colony, and then two different colonies, one from Spain and the other one from France. So I want to explore the landscapes that were crucial in these relationships, and how in the path of this history of this brotherhood that has been like torn and wounded. Why I want to explore why this story has been said this way in one side of the island and the story is said in another way in the other side of the island, and why we're having these issues still so many years later, and very important issues that divide us. And of course, also I want to bring out what brings us together. So yes, I'm very in the very start of the process of research for this film. I am currently working in Barcelona, so I'm not there to be able to go into field. I hope I can go soon. I couldn't be doing it anyway, even if I was there, because of the pandemic. I couldn't move freely in between the countries, and so this is going to mean a delay in the process, an important delay, but I hope I can make it in less than 10 years or so. It's gonna take time, but I hope I can start next year to visit these places and start filming also.